Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. I stumbled through that a little bit because my eyes got really dry all of a sudden, and I felt myself starting to have a little bit of a tear up. Hopefully that's not a problem throughout the recording. So it's been a hell of a week. Patch 5.25 released. We actually put out some guides in a timely manner with minimal error. I believe there's an error in when certain tank busters are used, as opposed to it being at a set time versus after certain attacks. Fortunately, not anything too bad considering we put that out the day that it actually was released. We also had Final Fantasy VII Remake. We put out a single guide. We put out a review for it, which I mentioned in last week's episode, and we're working on a few other guides. I don't really care how well the videos do. I'm just kind of obsessed with 7 Remake right now, so it's the videos that I want to make the most, I think. And we'll be back on schedule with State of the Realm this week. We'll probably have a TBG at some point talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake. And then we have some plans for State of the Realm because it looks like there's going to be an extra month before the next patch due to everything that's going on in the world right now. Fortunately, Sly and I actually planned something for that month, so we'll have some extra content to filter that, but that definitely means there's going to be weeks where we just have TBGs talk about games. It's inevitable, and I'm glad that we decided to pilot that, and hopefully the next shows go as well as the last one did. But before we go any further, just want to throw a shout out to our supporters over on Patreon. They've been supporting us through these times and other times YouTube channel. You know, sometimes YouTube, just not so great. Sometimes videos randomly get demonetized. Sometimes, you know, the ads don't pay super well. And sometimes YouTube just sucks in general. So we've had our Patreon going for quite some time now to support the channel. And it's been great. So thank you to everyone whose names have been scrolling in that little section on the screen. And of course, thanks to our Patron of Darkness, Khuja on Jenova, and Kurenai Oni. Both of y'all have supported above and beyond. And I'm really glad to have all of you on there. I hope you're all staying safe, staying healthy. And thank you to everyone as well, even if you're not on that list, for tuning in for every episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. But with that, my eyes are freaking out right now. So I think I should probably get to the Q&A so I can rest them, I guess. Let's answer some questions. Okay, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. First thing I see. All right, good. Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of comments. There's like 26 comments in total, so depends on how many of those are questions, I suppose. Hey, Apps, I have a question about Mentor. Oh boy, we could spend an hour talking about this on its own. Since I didn't really run any content outside of normal mode before Ruby Extreme, even though I've played for years, now that I've had a taste of that, I've been spending a lot of time lately getting better at the game while learning about clearing EX fights like Hades, Titania, Innocence, as well as old Savages. For the most recent versions, such as Hades EX, O12, E4, met some fantastic people who have taken hours out of their day to potentially coach me and others through fights that they cleared long ago. Good mentors. It has been a great experience and made me all the more appreciative of the community than ever before, and I decided to pay it forward by helping a number of learning groups clear the EX this week. Meanwhile, I've unfortunately run into more official mentors I can count that are not helpful at all, aggressively rude, and even flat out bad. Is there any better way you could think of them to reward genuinely selfless people who devote hours to actually helping others instead of these who have just played long enough to get the requirements and instance duties, whether or not they're actually helpful? Yeah, this is one of the main things I criticize. If you've watched any of my other videos where any question like this comes up, because it's a question I answer fairly frequently, I am not someone who appreciates Final Fantasy XIV's mentor system because of exactly the reasons that you've laid forth. And to clarify again, there are good mentors out there, but unfortunately negativity has a way of shining through over positivity, especially in MMOs. You know, a lot of us remember those moments that just, oh man, that we just couldn't stand other people, and those really stick out, especially if you're someone who's easily affected by negativity. And in these cases, you know, the system is how it is, and people will use it how they will, whether or not it's actually helpful to others. The only thing I can think of is something that they will never do, I think is the best way to put it, and that is for people to actually need to maintain like a star rating, like an Uber or a Lyft or something, or like a restaurant, like Yelp. And I sincerely doubt they do that, because you, in especially something like Final Fantasy XIV, the number of people who would just grief by rating low is just as big a problem as the bad mentors themselves. Don't get me wrong, again, there'll be plenty of people that use it properly, but you could be like a top tier player, you're playing extremely well, but you could do like one thing someone doesn't agree with, not even necessarily something that is wrong, and people could vote you down. Like, you could be the healer DPSing, and someone will give you, oh, 1-star mentor healer was DPSing like an idiot. Like, I would totally see that happening, and I've had enough situations where, as a healer in a random duty, I've had people yell at me for DPSing, and I go, are you dead? No? Weird, right? Isn't that my job? Yeah, I think it is. That's an instant 1-star if you're a mentor and that's the kind of reply that you have. Or even if you're just doing it in the first place. So there's so many holes in it that I've just... my opinion just is that the system is flawed. It will probably never not be flawed. And the things they could do to fix it then come with other flaws. And it's a matter of trade-offs, trade-ons. I'd honestly rather just not have the system at all. Or not have any direct rewards tied to it. But that's not, then why do it? Like, that's the problem. It's all trying to incentivize people to be mentors, but trying to incentivize the good people to do it without incentivizing the bad people. And that's just not human nature. If there's a way someone can abuse something, someone will always do it. And bad mentors are essentially the abuse of the mentor system. So unfortunately, I don't think there's a way they can realistically fix it without opening up more doors to more problems. Okay, this one didn't have a hashtag, but it seems like a really short and easy question to answer. Hello, Haps. I haven't played 14 in quite some time, since 5.0 and the last free period. I was wondering if now seemed like a good time to get back into the game. You know, I've been considering making a quick video about stuff like this. When is it right to start playing Final Fantasy 14 again? Because to me, it's a weird question. It's not to a lot of people, especially those who are asking it like you, but... realistically, it's very rare that there's a bad time to play. There can be a bad time to play in the view of like somebody who plays super frequently. Like they can break it down to timing of like a patch cycle versus item level being released versus when the next content releases, when the last content releases. So there could technically be an answer, but realistically, if there's a lengthened time that you haven't done anything in Final Fantasy 14, then there's never really a bad time to come back because you will still have all those things to do before you do the most recent things. Now, I'd say if you're someone who only likes doing a specific activity, then there can be a bad time to come back into the game. You know, if you're someone, oh, I just really like raiding and I beat the 5.2 raid tier and it's like 5.3 something and you're like, should I come back? And it's like, well, there's no ultimate in 5.3. You know, maybe we get something else that you can do that's like harder content. But I would argue that that may be a place where you have consideration about what it was a bad time. But if you're just someone who plays the game and you like playing it occasionally, there's never a bad time. You can hop in on the free logins. You can hop in when you just have spare time and you want to catch up on old stuff. You're wondering what's going on. But I would say that right now is actually the closest you'd get to a rough time coming back, because we did get confirmation that there will definitely be a patch delay for 5.3 due to everything going on in the world right now. So you would argue that with that content delay, that immediately is cause for going, well, do I want to come back now or do I want to wait till like those things calm down? We're back on cycle, so I have a better grasp of like when things will come, what is coming, etc., etc. But if you haven't played in a while, I'd say it wouldn't hurt for you to log in, pay a month sub, get the things you want to get done, and then, you know, wait until all that stuff mulls over. And yeah, I've been thinking about making a video about, is it the right time to come back? Because I get that question a lot with a lot of different personal experiences as anecdotes for like why they stopped or, you know, why they want to come back. And I feel like it's an interesting enough topic. I see the name of a job in here that I really don't have the right to talk about right now, but I'll see if I can answer it anyway. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how's it going? It's going good, other than my freaking eyes, dude, since the beginning of the recording. I've been leveling Monk, and I noticed they made Fist of Wind relevant by making Fist of Fire irrelevant after the first few GCDs. I think it's a bit disappointing that the other two stances don't really matter. You think they'll ever do something with Monk that has them cycle through stances? So we actually had gameplay that encouraged that in the previous expansion, and it was, well, a lot of monks would consider that the shining time of Monk, when Fist of Wind was used strategically to use the wind tackle in order to generate extra stacks of Grease Lightning after utilizing Tornado Kick, which was also a previously considered useless skill at the time, and then using Fist of Fire in between those periods of time. So it was a constant swap back and forth between Fire and Wind. On top of that, Riddle of Earth used to swap you to Fist of Earth, so on top of triggering the effect, you'd also gain more damage reduction, which was of course useful. I'd say exactly what you've asked for is very akin to Stormblood Monk, and there are a lot of people that miss that. That was the most unique Monk's gameplay has been. It was also among the most punishing points in time, where if you weren't doing that, you could still be good, but making a mistake doing it was absolutely a game breaker. Like if you screwed up doing the Tornado Kick, double Tornado Kick style stuff, openers, reopeners, the consistent gameplay, you were begging to just plummet in efficiency. So there's a lot of people who would actually like to go back to that though. So I think there's a chance they go back to it at some point. I don't think most people are really resonating with Monk. Still, it's easier to play, but it's just kind of lame at the moment. I don't really know how to describe it because I kind of gave it up going into Shadowbringer in exchange for Dancer, and even now Machinist I've started to, poke my head into, not doing like fantastic on it, but when you go from something so dead brain like Dancer to something that is not super big brain like Machinist, but is certainly more brain, I guess, it's been a good experience. So I have hope they'll bring back cycling through stances on Monk, and I do really hope that they really take a look at Monk gameplay going into 6.0, because as much as it's really nice that Monk hasn't drastically changed over the years, it's been just as much a boon as it has been a detriment, because it's mean everything they've added since then is either 100% insanely awesome or like the most worthless situational skill. That's why I laugh whenever samurais were complaining, oh, pre-meditate change, oh, meditate, these meditation stacks are so situational, this sucks. And I'm like, oh, you got a situational skill that is unsatisfying to use? Tell me more, samurai players, as someone who played Monk. So maybe. My answer to you is maybe. Alright, next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Mr. Happy, meow aloha. I don't think he's in here right now. You mentioned in the last one you don't care about dungeons, that they're pointless or something. I completely agree, but that also extends to the raids. They end up being a yawn fest every time thanks to their 0 skill, 100% memorization challenge. That said, the technology to give, for example, just a savage tier, decent AI seems to exist, as it's already been applied to much more complex and skill-intensive games, from our RTS and MOBA to even chess. Do you have any hopes to see a change like that at some point, even moving the loot to story mode tier, since it's demonstratively not needed for any content besides ultimate? He'll say my static will not do classical prog anymore. Our work schedules help in that too. So I keep in mind that saying something is 0 skill, 100% memorization, I think is a gross over exaggeration of how encounters work. Just because something is random and you need to react to it doesn't necessarily mean that's what determines skill. Something being predictable but having minor elements of RNG also factors into not only memorization but skill of the player. Where real skill of the player comes in is how well they actually execute on their job mechanics while taking the information that they've internalized and memorized into effect. It's why you see a lot of North American players and a lot of North American strategies evolve so quickly, because while something can be effective, you could have memorized it, you could have done it properly and survived, there could be a better way to do it that either could be more risky or could even be less risky, but also optimizes on what players are able to actually do. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you still need to be able to press your buttons, and if it was just memorization and not skill, then a lot more people would probably have an easier time with it or succeed at it at a more regular pace. That's especially true of early prog, where just memorizing the mechanics doesn't mean you've suddenly overcome every individual challenge. You still need to be paying attention to who gets which debuff, where people need to go, where the mechanics were placed this time, because it could be different than the last time. There's all these little things that factor into just memorization not really being enough. And having a dynamic AI doesn't necessarily make a game experience any better. Because a lot of the times when you're racing for something or you're trying to complete something, the consistency and the reliability of knowing your knowledge is always going to be put to the use at all applicable times is certainly going to be something that comes into play very, very heavily. I give a great example being Kingdom Hearts 3. I mean, actually any of the Kingdom Hearts games. Most bosses there, most people would say you'd have to be fairly skilled to get through a lot of the bosses on the harder difficulties, Proud and Critical, because there's things such as block timings, opening up attack windows, but you're able to determine those things by 100% memorization of how you actually trigger certain skills, how often you see certain skills, and how certain skills interact with one another. I can give the reason I say Kingdom Hearts 3 is because the final secret boss in the Remind DLC essentially came down to memorization for me. I had to memorize certain parts of his phases, exactly how many attacks he did, counting his individual strikes, and after I did that, it was just about executing on that memorization. So I find that more often than not, that is a predeterminate tool that we mock it almost in Final Fantasy XIV, but it is demonstratable in a lot of other both online games and single-player games. So, no, I don't see this changing. I don't think it's 0 skill, 100% memorization. Like I said, I think that's a gross over-exaggeration of what it takes. But once you've practiced and 100% committed to something and you're a master of your craft, it definitely will feel that way, because now to you, it's effortless. It's not invoking a sense of challenge, when initially it probably did. So it's a matter of pre-memorization versus post-memorization, and how you interpret what actually is a skill versus what is just an act of not a test of knowledge and repetition. Alright, so we've got a hashtag re-ask. By the way, I like the use of that hashtag, because I do remember this. I even remember the layout of the dialogue from last week. Dialogue? The text. I'm playing too much Final Fantasy VII Remake. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey there, long-time listener, first-time asker. As a bonus, have a Thorn March Ultimate. That's not a bonus. That's a fucking curse. Edit, I don't know if this question counts as hashtag spoiler or not. To edit this at your discretion. Okay, if this is a spoiler, I'll do what I do and I'll throw it at the end of the video. If it's not, then we'll leave it right here. The possible spoiler is in point 1. So I can read. So 1 is technically, but it's more speculation than spoiler. It's like, it's 5.0 spoilers. Those are almost 1-year-old spoilers at this point. So I'm not going to throw this in the spoiler section. If you haven't finished 5.0 yet, odds are you, I'm not going to lie, if you're watching this channel after all these years, odds are you finished 5.0 if you're watching my weekly Q&A for Final Fantasy 14. It's just, that's a majority odds. So I'm not going to put this in the spoiler section. I'm going to leave this as is. It's a 2-part question, but both parts are related to each other. Okay. 1, with how epic the story was for 5.x, do you think this expansion could end with a calamity level event? I feel like us dealing with Zodiark and Hydaelyn at this point is pretty epic stuff. It's a big question of scale. Like, what determines the scale that the next expansion takes? Because pretty much all of the biggest plot lines are being tackled right now with the Hydaelyn Zodiark storyline. I mean, it's been the underlying thing that has motivated our actions through several expansions, even with the sort of, in regards to scale, the micro problems of that of the Dragon Song War, or that of the Garleans and Alamigo and Doma. Like, the scale hasn't really necessarily gotten grander until 5.x, where it's been like, if we don't resolve this, every world is dead. All the people we've ever met are dead. All the people we haven't met are dead, and we're not. And it's realistically, we're supposed to die. So yeah, it's pretty important. So a calamity level event would make sense, but a calamity level event presumes, or assumes, I guess, that we don't deal with the remainder of the Zodiark Hydaelyn story. We were told that we were very far through settling the Hydaelyn Zodiark, and the idea of a whole nother expansion dealing with that, I don't know. I don't buy into having something as extreme as a calamity level event. I don't think you need to keep raising the stakes. I think that's a problem that you can set yourself up for, the need to keep creating a threat, but not just creating a threat, but creating one that is escalated from the one prior. We see it a lot with World of Warcraft. We went from, you know, problems in classic WoW that were remnants or leftovers from Warcraft 3, and then we had the Burning Crusade, which was a massive threat, but the exact nature of the Burning Crusade, we essentially squashed it down, so it became not a problem for a while, even though we knew it wasn't permanent. Wrath of the Lich King raised the bar a little bit more. We had invasions into the home cities. We had, you know, undead armies, and we had another classic Warcraft 3 villain who was left, who we had to deal with. Finally, a Warcraft 2 villain. We move over into what was the expansion? Cataclysm, which raised the bar more. Now the world was actually so scarred that it was completely rewritten as we knew it, and we've opened up all sorts of evils in the process of doing that. Then they tried to scale it back a little bit when we went over to, I think it was Mists after that. And it was sort of offsetting, so much so that when they revealed what kind of like the true plot was, and they tried to raise the scales of it, of the entire horde being under the control of an absolute madman, it still didn't feel nearly as epic in scale, but it still felt really influential to people who had been playing WoW up to that point. There were so many things leading up to that point that the player had the feeling it was going to be happening, and when it finally did, it was satisfying to resolve it without it necessarily being stakes being raised even higher than the previous one. So I feel like that's really important to keep in mind. We can have threats to the world that aren't Ascian or Calamity or, you know, any sort of level threat is that, but it can still definitely be a threat to life on the source or on the first or on any of the individual shards. Now that I've spewed enough about question number 1, question number 2 is, do you think if part 1 is applicable, that the Square Enix will use the chance to give us an updated engine and pay off the tech debt that plagues our current game's engine? I don't think we ever see a point where Final Fantasy XIV rewrites its entire engine a second time. Now, paying off tech debt is something that they've been slowly trying to do with workarounds over years. Like, we've had quality of life additions to Final Fantasy XIV over the years that for a long time they told us, like, I don't know if we can do that, when it'll be feasible, can we even do that, there's this problem, there's that problem, you know, the amount of memory, the rate at which we store items, whatever. And it seems like over time they've gradually overcome that technical debt. That's not to say there is no technical debt left. There definitely is, and I feel like that's just, you know, a remnant of what 1.x was and how it was built in the first place. But I don't think it necessarily needs it as much as it could be, it would be beneficial to us. I just don't think they will do it. I think it'll disrupt their update cycle too much. I think it will disrupt, I think that they probably don't want to tackle something as severe as that when they could just make another Final Fantasy game on a new engine that they've developed or on an updated engine, but they don't want to do that. So, you know, there's all sorts of clashes, I guess, with sort of their mission statement or their mission goal with the development of Final Fantasy XIV. Especially right now, I think they're mostly just trying to get everything in store so they can keep providing us with the updates and, you know, get back on their normal schedule, and that something like this, especially in the current landscape of things, would just seem largely unfeasible. This person's name's not on the screen, but skip cutscene. Solid name. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, you doing alright? I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. First time askers have a bonus of being able to experience any game as though it was your first time again. Gonna do 7 Remake again? That's very recent, but I'll take it. Recently, you mentioned your top 3 there you go, top 3 Final Fantasy games. I'm wondering, how do you feel 14's narrative compares to other Final Fantasy titles? Do you find it suffers from being an MMO as opposed to a single-player game? I think more so that it's impressive it is what it is, considering it's an MMO. Now, there are other MMOs out there that have story-driven aspects, and some do well and some don't. And I don't mean the individual games, I sometimes mean just from story to story. And we've experienced that with Final Fantasy XIV. There are ones that people prefer over the other. There's ones that people really love that are divisive and people hate. But that being said, I think that Final Fantasy XIV is nothing short of a pretty amazing accomplishment. I would have never expected the quality of especially Shadowbringers from an MMO ever. I just wouldn't have expected it. It probably would have happened. I probably missed a game that had a really good story for an MMO. But something of that scale, of that magnitude, I could have never foreseen it. So no, I actually think that it should have suffered from being an MMO, and that it oddly doesn't. I'm sure you could pick out small bits that, like, I wish I didn't have to do this, and this is just because it's an MMO, but it genuinely shocks me that it doesn't suffer from being an MMO more than it does. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Happy, you doing alright? I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. I want a pizza. Been a while since I last asked a question. Figured I'd ask something in regards to streaming. Sure. As someone who is very new to streaming, I found it more than a bit head-scratching trying to work with Twitch tools. Okay, since I stream from the PS4, yeah, the word janky following this is certainly apt. I get the janky sidebox for chat and cam instead of having it integrated more naturally into what's displayed for viewers. On top of that, having any kind of viewers has been a notable challenge. One I expect, since I'm new and an unknown face, people tend to lean to what's familiar. My question is, what advice would you give a new streamer for building up a base of viewers? My number one piece of advice is you shouldn't even think about that. Listen, as someone who's done it for so many years, nothing has plagued me mentally more than trying to think about what I did wrong on a given day. Like, why did I have less viewers this day? Why did I have more viewers that day? You know, was it this game? Was it that game? I played 14 this day. Should I lead with 14 and play a different game? Can I just play this different game that just came out? Like, as someone who, like, I'm blessed with people who watch my YouTube channel, someone who watches my content on Twitch. Every time I've ever thought about this, about building up a base or, you know, maintaining or anything, it's caused me nothing but a massive amount of even thinking about answering this question is a massive amount of mental stress, because I think back to all the times I've had any remote, like, just so much concern over viewers. And so when I first started, before I had any viewers, before anyone knew my YouTube or my Twitch, I didn't have anyone watching. And you know what? That didn't change me that much. I just wanted to go live because some of my favorite content media was live streams. I was watching Dyrus on owned.tv at the time. You know, I was consuming a lot of League content overall. I started discovering Minecraft streamers, and Twitch was really starting to blow up, and I thought, man, it would be the coolest thing to stream on this platform. But, you know, all that really matters is that I just do it. I guess. Like, just the occasional stream. Like, there's nothing I can really do about it. You know, I might as well just start doing it. And I think it was because I didn't think, oh, I need to build up a base of viewers. I'm just going to go live. I had this comfort about me. Every stream I went live was, early on, was so just damn stress-free. Just so little worries in the world. I didn't have to look at a viewer count. I didn't have to think about, you know, what my next bills were. Or, you know, was this going to be a sustainable thing? And you know what? Nowadays, I've kind of come to fruition with all that. But I think starting out, my biggest piece of advice is don't worry about your base of viewers. Just worry about being the best damn person you can be. Because if that isn't your first concern, then the people will never come. Now, even keep in mind, you can have that thought, and they may never come still, because it's a super saturated form of entertainment right now. You can't. A lot of people go into it with the thought of it will be a career for me, and it's just not that kind of career. You know, it's not that kind of a way to earn a living where you go into it and you're like, all right, well, clearly this is going to pay my bills, and I've never streamed before. And I feel like a lot of people go into that with that mentality because of the people they do see with a viewer base, with success that produce content. I'd say that don't worry about building up a base for viewers. It's literally going to drive you mad. It drives me mad on occasion, and it just stresses me out, so I would never wish that upon someone else. And working with Twitch to provide a better viewing experience, honestly, the best way to do that is to get a capture card and stream your PS4 through your PC onto Twitch instead of using the PS4 tool. Now, that's not super feasible right now for a lot of people. It's unreasonable to just tell anyone right now, well, go buy this, do that, spend your money on it's just not a realistic thing to tell people right now. So if that's not a possibility, I mean, you have what you have, and you just got to use it to the best of your ability. It may not be what you want all the way through, but everyone's got to, you know, take their passion and start with it somewhere. Because, you know, if it is truly a passion, if it is truly something you love doing, then it doesn't matter if you have 1 viewer, 100 viewers, 1,000 viewers. If you're playing on the PS4, Xbox, if you're streaming through your PC, it'll find a way. It'll find a way. And so all of that collectively is hopefully advice that you can take to heart, even if it's maybe not the kind of answer you are hoping for. I think my eyes were already like kind of dry and watering, and I think even just thinking about some of the things in that last question got me a little watery-eyed even more. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Mr. Happy, how you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? You're doing as well as can be expected lately. You know, that's a good answer for it. Alea Ryu from Twitch, and I have been in heavy lurk mode or unable to join in the fun recently. Apologies, this will be a bit of a wall of text. Nah, you don't have to apologize for that. Listen, if it was too much of a wall, I just wouldn't have answered it. Maybe. I have one question for you today, and it's regarding the recent state of the realm with Ash. I had mentioned it in the comments of the video uploaded here on YouTube, but I would like your opinion and thoughts on a certain way of reworking Desynth. The way I described it in the comment was heavily overblown, but basically it would put more rare materials into Desynth for those who level cap it. You know, they kind of already tried to do that as of right now since the change. There are materials you can get, even some like tombstone mats from high level Desynths if you're somebody who meets an adequate enough level. So they've done that, and they can expand upon that and do more with it. The rare materials would go into crafting things like ornate equipment. So I think actually in that episode, Ash mentions the possibility of making 5-slot items being expert recipes in particular. I think even expert recipes would have to be even more difficult if that was going to be a possibility. But that being said, yeah, I mean, that seems like a really basic thing. I'm still of the opinion that my expert Desynth idea, it was a joke at first. But have you ever said something that wasn't serious, and the more you thought about it, the more you were like, wait, I'm a genius? I know I have, and it definitely happened on that episode of State of the Realm. So I think between my idea and your idea, yeah, there's plenty of things they could do to add value to it for people who actually have it leveled, but man, did opening it up so much it killed so many of my markets, man. Now it's like I can still make money, but it's all you know, change compared to what I was making before. So it is what it is. Hopefully they take your idea or my idea or something like it and throw it in there, but I'm not hopeful. Oh boy, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where we ask. I can't even do my own intro. I tried to say it too fast. Hey, yo, Habs, how you doing? I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. Have tombstones of soul. Tomb. Wait, you combine tomb and tome, and we got Tombe. Tombe? Tombe stones. Tombe stones. of soldiery. And of all things, it's soldiery after all that. And a question. Last week, there was a question about dungeons, how to make them better, and it made me think. Do you think it would be possible to make branching paths in dungeons to give them some variety? This question has hit a million times before. It's not ever, with dungeons, it's not ever a matter of what is possible or what is impossible. The question is what audience it's designed for. Because a lot of us who would love like a harder dungeon or harder 4-man content, the dungeons are content that's just straight up not made for us in the first place. It's made for people who want to be able to grab some tomestones and be done. That's it. That's literally what dungeons are designed for. So as much as all of these ideas, they do adhere to what a dungeon is. They're not counter to the definition of a dungeon, so something like branching paths. It's a question of what the point of them is in Final Fantasy XIV. For me, there is no point. But for a lot of people, and I can't stress this enough, the average player, a dungeon is a genuinely good experience. And it seems like such a weird thing for me to say, but when I made the biggest note of this when I don't remember, it might have been in a Mondays with Mr. Happy, it might have been in a State of the Realm, but I had a spot where I said that dungeons were absolutely worthless and that we shouldn't feel bad for getting rid of them. Now, to be fair, I still feel that way. But when I said that, I had a lot of people come out in my comment section and be like, no, I really like doing dungeon content. There's nothing, I really look forward to I have 2 or 3 hours a night, and I log in and, you know, chat with my FC. We go through a dungeon or two together. Maybe we just do a round of roulettes together. We use it as our socializing experience. We mess around with each other a little bit. You know, we get some really rough duty finders and alliance roulette, and it genuinely defines my experience. And I had a lot of comments that were along those lines. So as much as I'm always down for ideas like branching paths or hard modes, like real hard modes or extreme or savage of the 4-man content, it clashes with their overall choice of design for dungeons in Final Fantasy XIV, and we don't define that. We can only say we want more content that's difficult in this range, and if it happens, then we'll know that that feedback was accounted for and used to create a new experience. But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case with regular dungeons. So these ideas are not bad ideas, but they're just counter to Final Fantasy XIV's intended audience for a dungeon. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Mr. And happy Monday to you. Happy Monday to you. Sunday for me, but I'll take your happy Monday. Maybe it means my tomorrow will be excellent. Just finished 7 Remake. Okay, just so you guys know, if this has spoilers in it, I'll probably re-answer it or put it towards the end. I just see the word 7 Remake, and that's immediately my thought. If there's no spoilers in it, this question will just be sequentially where it belongs. Everyone, I'm craving more. Since they didn't call the game 7 Remake Part 1, it got me thinking that further content will be released via DLC up until we have the full game. This would allow for more regular releases. I heard they plan to release other parts within 18 months. So I'm going to tell you right now, we know nothing about the release schedule. We know that in November, they started working on Part 2. Now, what they actually accomplished from November until now is a question mark. And the actual development of it is also a question mark because no doubt the other development teams in Square Enix Japan are having the same concerns that the Final Fantasy XIV team is having, where people have to move to working remote, it's harder to do voice acting work, etc., etc. So, that throw everything you think you know about the release windows, because A, even if they were that, they are not that anymore, and B, we know nothing about them. So this whole 18-month thing, it would be lovely, but there's been nothing to indicate that that's even remotely true. As for the actual game, I guarantee you, and I've been wrong before, so feel free to come back and call me on this if I am wrong. They have said every part will be developed as if it was a full AAA game. DLC is very rarely the equivalent of a full AAA game. I am fairly confident with that statement that every game will be developed as if it was a full game. Means, yes, you will be paying $60 for every part. I feel like most people have come to terms on that at this point. B, everyone will be a different release. With the PS5 coming out especially, I feel like this should be even more abundantly obvious. And C, was I doing this via number or letters? Who cares? One BC works for me. Just the first year that everything existed. And C, now I forgot what C was. And C, there's going to be a collector. There's no doubt. I think there's going to be a collectors for every single one. Honestly, as someone who's played through 7 Remake, and again, not spoiling anything, I am not convinced we'll carry all of our progress through to every game. I won't say anything more than that, but there's a few items, one in particular that I may have obtained that makes me go, yeah, that's not happening. So I'm going to stick to that, and hopefully we'll find out more information in the next year or so. But I don't expect a release till at least 2022. Honestly, 2023 now with everything going on. And I wouldn't expect it to be DLC. I expect it to be a standalone release. By that point, the PS4 will have been out for, or won't be the newest console for quite some time. So I don't feel they're just gonna, over the next 3, 6, however many years it takes, just release it as DLC to the base game. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hope you're doing well. Doing as well as I can. Thank you. And same to you. I have a Dancer question. So I've been playing Dancer for 2 Savage tiers now, and I think I'm sadly falling out of love with it. In a static with Dragoon Monk and Black Mage, I feel like I'm holding the group back, DPS-wise. Shane Dancer will always be on the low end, but RNG is making me feel bad. Question, since you've been playing Dancer and Savage for a while, have you thought or changed about it at all? Do you think it could use any improvements? The same improvements I wanted for Dancer like week 1 are still the same improvements I want now. I want improv to always give 10 Esprit instead of it being based on the number of party members that are nearby, because especially in 4-man content or anything that's less than a full 8, it feels especially useless. That little healing buff that it gives, like, I guess if you're going to have downtime anyway, which is very rare in dungeons, that you have downtime where you can actually channel it and everyone's stacked, then, cool. But I'd like it to just give 10 Esprit every time. I'd also like Saber Dance to extend the duration of your finishing flourishes, so you don't feel bad when in the middle of a burst window you get 4 or 5 Saber Dance, like those crazy good RNG Saber Dances, and you're like, well, I can't do more than this amount or I lose my finishing flourishes. And sometimes that can be a little bit frustrating. The decision path is set so that you can, you know how many you can do. But there's times where you can do that many and still end up with too much Esprit, so that could be bad. And there was one other one I had, I think it was like to expand the ranges of applying the buff for the dances, or to extend the range of the dance itself, because sometimes you're doing a mechanic and a boss is just straight up out of range and you have to sit on it to make sure that you don't waste time. But that has other drawbacks, but I think for the most part nobody really does the pre-pull buffing for Dancer, like the pre-pull, like 30-something second countdown that people do. I don't think anyone seriously does that, so I don't think that would even be a problem. So yeah, I'm gonna go with those still 3 being the changes I would make. As for falling out of love, have I thoughts changed on it at all? No, I still love it because I think it's the most fun to play in terms of mobility. I love Enavon. It's just one of my favorite skills in the game. I also really like the effect that I have, and I get the effect of seeing the big numbers. I get those fat standard and technical steps, which are really satisfying. It's something I've loved on other jobs as well, and Dancer being a ranged physical, that feels really good to get. It has a very consistent level of play. You're able to quickly change targets without having to worry about a whole lot of setup, and you're mostly in the supporting DPS role. You are you are providing your own DPS, but the amount that you provide to the party is substantial. So much so that, a lot of people have shifted over to bringing dancers as one of their ranged physical DPS of choice, because it's easier to play, and it does provide a substantial amount. It also provides pretty good utility. Honestly, Curing Waltz I've been thanked by a great number of healers for Curing Waltz when we're stacked up and we can time it with big AoEs, so that if there's any sort of lapse in GCDs at any single point, that I can be of some assistance there. That being said, the mental provocation that comes with other jobs has started to become something that influences how I feel about Dancer slightly. Like, I've started doing a little bit of Machinist in Savage, and I'm not, like I said earlier, I'm not great at it. Like, I've only put in the bare minimum number of hours. I barely understand boss timings versus like where I am in the Machinist rotation, even though it's still sitting on 1 minute and 2 minute timers like Dancer. But I just don't have the familiarity with it to execute on it on a comfortable level like I do with Dancer, which is just dead brain for me. And that's been fun. That addition of needing to, I guess, stimulate my brain a little bit more has actually made me go, you know what, if allowed, I would honestly play Machinist in a raid tier. I don't think I could bring myself to do it because I feel like I'd just be so much more useful on Dancer, but I would 100% do that. It's just the right level of fun and execution demand that without being overly complex, I suppose. So that's the only thing that's really changed for me, but I still love Dancer, and it will probably still be my main for the rest of the expansion. I see the word spoiler in this question, and it specifically says that it's about 5.x zones, only description of the landscape, so I'm not going to include this in its spoiler-only section. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hi, Haps. I have a question regarding the open world of Final Fantasy XIV. I've been sitting on this opinion for a few years, and would love to hear your thoughts on the matter. Ever since the end of Heavensward, I've felt a lack of life in the zones in each expansion, especially if you compare them to the artwork and the loading screens. Take Ilmeg, and the artwork shows tons of paths and structures along the mountains, with waterfalls and bridges crossing the valley. In the actual zone, there's not really much going on. I mean, those things are still there, but they're not presented to you all as one static image. They're moving parts that are present to scale. You know what I mean? The reason I ask this now is because of the new relic quest. We get to see a pretty huge city-state in the background when doing a certain quest. I would love to see more like it in the open world. Not that the area has to be accessible, but that it gives a feeling of more life in the open world. I feel like it would add to the curiosity about each zone. See, I feel like this is really a matter of taste. And you've said you're sitting on this opinion, which thank you for clarifying that, because plenty of people come into the question section and they skip this my opinion point and they just make a flat statement. And sometimes, you know, it's not uncommon for people, myself included, to do that as just like a sense of expressing how passionately we feel. But I am aware when I do it, it's kind of off-putting. When other people do it, it's off-putting. So I'm kind of glad that you took the time to say you're sitting on this opinion, because I don't share this opinion. So it's hard for me to, I guess, provide you with an input that, I guess, supports the way you feel about it, because it doesn't meet the way I feel. I happen to, you know, I'm fortunate enough to be friends with Ethis, and he puts me through the ringer with my lack of lore knowledge and landmarks and stuff every time we do a quiz show. But if there's anything I've learned about that, it's that there's always more for me to learn about these zones. Things that may seem inconsequential in the landscape or in the activity of it can have deep and intertwined stories with the rest of the zone. The naming conventions, why something is where it is, or a mystery that we maybe still haven't unraveled yet. There's I find curiosity and knowledge and lore and all those things. And because because I'm friends with someone who is such a lore nerd, I feel he's enriched my appreciation for things. Even when I don't fully understand them, I always think, oh, I wonder what the story is behind this. Even if I don't necessarily pursue the knowledge, I'm not bored with said thing that's in front of me. I don't not appreciate it because it doesn't feel as alive or exciting. I appreciate that it's there for a reason, and that I can expect things like that in the future. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to provide, I guess, an answer that supports your opinion when I don't share that opinion. So I've been really happy with the aesthetics. The only places I haven't been happy with the aesthetics, and I completely agree with you, is the majority of the Ala Mhigan areas. The first one we go into, because it's the first one and it has that aesthetic, was a little bit better. But then the other two, while they have landmarks and they have distinct pieces about them, they're too samey for me between all three of the Girabonian zones. That's the only place where I 100% agree, where I'm like, there's some interesting things here. I'm aware of them, but like these places all look so samey, and that's just kind of Okay, if there's anything I've learned, it's that A, I answered a lot of questions with really long answers, and B, these 26 comments, most of them were questions. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Noob question. Hello to you too, by the way. But can you explain how level sync and item level sync work? This actually might be worth a video on its own. If I have item level 46 gear and go into a level 50 dungeon, if the instant syncs me, does the values of my levels go down to what they were at 50 and I retain all the values of my I-485 gear? So, quick answer, no. You're brought down to the exact, here's the exact rule. You're brought down to your level 50 stats. Your level 50 skills are all that's accessible, and your gear is synced down to the highest item level that is available inside of that dungeon. So let's say a dungeon caps at item level 135. Let's just throw that number out there. That was the highest item level that was available at the time. That's the highest item level that it will sync down to. Maybe it's even what's listed as the item level sync for said dungeon. That is what your values will be set at. On top of that, materia has no effect when you sync down. I don't believe they've changed that at any point, but materia has no effect on your stats when you sync down. It's why when people pursue doing ultimate content, especially the level 70 kind, some people go out of their way to get item level 345 relic gear and item level 375 dungeon gear, because it's level appropriate and they can put materia in it so that it's actually effective for those levels. So they're making sure to put as much into their efficiency and going back and doing this old content. The same will eventually be done for the Epic of Alexander. In patch 5.3, we are likely to have a dungeon that provides is the perfect item level gear for the Epic of Alexander to make it as efficient as possible. But to answer the question, yeah, no, everything is syncing down, and materia is not working in this case. Do developers only implement item level sync if they think we are breezing through dungeons? No, because honestly, even without item level sync, we breeze through dungeons. You heard me mention, I guess the Final Fantasy 14 approach to dungeons in an earlier answer. So no, it's sort of there for that reason, but it never really accomplishes that goal because dungeons aren't a hardcore piece of content. They just like to preserve it a little bit while still kind of just letting you steamroll through the whole thing. Okay, I've already read this question. This isn't actually a spoiler. So, but thank you for putting hashtag Final Fantasy VII Remake spoilers. Even if it says kind of, it's not a spoiler at all. It's literally just, I'll just read it. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays, hashtag Final Fantasy VII are spoilers, kind of, but not really, in my opinion. Hey, Happy, hope all is going well with these crazy times. It is, and I hope you're safe and healthy. Oh, by the way, this is the last question I just noticed. I was just wondering, after having played through 7 Remake, what your prediction on how many parts will be in total, and where do you think each game will end? So I'm not going to answer the second half of that, because that might actually get into spoiler territory. I will tell you that I think it will be more than 3 parts. I've thought that ever since we kind of found out where the first game would be ending, and we've had that information for quite some time. I have my thoughts, but I am going to be doing a full-blown spoiler video on Final Fantasy VII Remake, discussing everything about it and what we should maybe expect, or at least what my expectations are for the future of the different parts of 7 Remake. But with that, that's actually the last question. So we got through almost every question. I think there was one question I skipped because it was a lore question about Aura, and I have no idea about it. So that literally would have been my answer. So I was just kind of a worthless, sack of potatoes when it came to that question. But other than that, we got through every question, I'm pretty sure. So thank you everyone for asking questions for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and ask your questions in the comments. I should really start saying the ask your questions in the comments thing at the beginning, so people are reminded before they've really gotten that far into the video. I could re-record this, but lesson learned for next week. But with that, thank you again. I will see all of you fine ladies and gentlemen in the next episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Thank you for watching, and until then, take care.